The emergency lights had stopped flashing 12 hours ago. There was no power left to waste on warnings. Only a dull crimson glow leaked through the corridors of the exploration cruiser Valoran, turning every steel wall into the color of dried blood. The ship drifted without purpose through an unclaimed stretch of space where navigation beacons ended and ancient stars burned without names. Every engine had long since fallen silent. Every backup reactor had been stripped apart by exhausted engineers searching for one final miracle. Captain Kalen stood on the bridge without moving. He had not slept in 3 days. His uniform had become stained with coolant, engine grease, and the dust that collected inside air filtration systems too weak to clean themselves. His silver eyes stared through the cracked forward viewport toward a darkness that seemed almost alive. Commander Varric approached quietly. The oxygen gardens failed. Kalen didn't answer. The lower habitat decks are gone. We've sealed them. Still nothing. There were children. Kalen finally closed his eyes. I know. The bridge fell silent again. Every officer present had stopped pretending they would survive. Their conversations had become softer over the past week, almost respectful, as though death itself had entered the room and taken a seat among them. A slow alarm echoed through the ship, not loud, not urgent, simply tired. Chief Engineer Celis appeared on the main display from reactor control. Her face was pale beneath soot and dried blood. One arm hung inside a makeshift sling. I've redirected everything. Kalen nodded once. How long? She looked away before answering. If everyone stops moving, maybe 18 hours. Nobody argued. Nobody searched for alternatives. The calculations had become unavoidable. The Valoran was dying one system at a time. 3 months earlier, they had accepted what appeared to be a simple diplomatic escort mission near the Orion Expanse. Intelligence had reported pirate activity disrupting civilian shipping lanes. Instead, they found an armada, not pirates, not raiders, warships, hundreds of them, no flags, no negotiations, only weapons. The first attack had erased 6 escort vessels before defensive systems even activated. The second destroyed every communication relay. The third shattered their slipspace drive. Captain Kalen had ordered retreat. Only one ship escaped. Barely. Now the galaxy pretended none of it had happened. Broadcast again. The communications officer hesitated. Captain, we've sent 187 distress calls. Make it 188. The damaged transmitter struggled to build enough power. Static swallowed most of the signal. Fragments escaped into space. This is exploration cruiser Valoran. Crew, civilians. Life support failing. Request humanitarian assistance. Please. The transmission disappeared into silence. Hours passed. No answer. Not even an automated response. Lieutenant Aris laughed. It wasn't amusement. It was exhaustion finally breaking something inside him. They hear us. Nobody objected. They know exactly where we are. He looked around the bridge. They've decided we're too expensive to save. Captain Kalen couldn't deny it. Fuel, distance, political risk. Those calculations always outweighed lives. Governments spoke endlessly about unity. Budgets spoke louder. On Deck 9, the medical ward had become impossibly quiet. Dr. Soraya moved carefully between rows of patients. She had exhausted every stimulant, every nutrient reserve, every emergency treatment. She adjusted blankets instead. It was all she had left to offer. A small child tugged gently at her sleeve. When do we get home? She smiled despite the tears gathering in her eyes. Soon. My father said stars always lead somewhere. They do. Then why aren't ours moving? She looked towards the ceiling because the engines were dead. Because civilization had abandoned them. Because rescue wasn't coming. Instead, she took the child's hand. We're still together. The child nodded. For children, sometimes that was enough. For adults, it wasn't. Far beyond the forgotten shipping lanes, another signal continued racing through empty space. Weak broken. Almost invisible, it crossed abandoned relay stations. Dead colonies, mining sectors, military exclusion zones. Thousands of listening arrays rejected it as background noise. Until one receiver noticed something strange. The Arctic listening complex sat beneath kilometers of reinforced ice. No tourists knew it existed. No public maps acknowledged its construction. Its operators called it Station 12. Most governments referred to it only through encrypted designations. It had listened to the universe for 86 years. Mostly it heard nothing. Solar interference. Ancient pulsars. Random electromagnetic ghosts. Senior technician Noah Hayes rubbed tired eyes while drinking terrible coffee. His shift should have ended 40 minutes earlier. Instead, a tiny waveform appeared across his monitor. He frowned. That's odd. Analyst Priya Raman rolled her chair beside him. What? I've got structured compression. Natural? No. She leaned closer. The signal almost vanished beneath static before returning. Priya increased gain. Fragments emerged. Request. Life support. Please. Both technicians stopped breathing. Noah whispered. Is that? Priya nodded slowly. Someone out there is asking for help. Within 15 minutes, the recording reached Earth's orbital defense network. Within 30 minutes, it arrived in Geneva. Within 1 hour, representatives from every major government sat inside the United Planetary Security Council. The room felt unusually small. General Marcus Hale stood beside the projection table. His broad shoulders carried decades of command experience, yet his expression remained calm. The damaged alien transmission played again. Static, pain, silence. Then the final word. Please. Nobody spoke immediately. President Elena Alvarez finally broke the silence. Verification? Director Hassan answered. No evidence of fabrication. Origin? Approximately 4,000 light-years beyond our current patrol boundary. Finance Minister Gregory Wells folded his hands. We don't even have diplomatic relations with that region. No. Sending a fleet would require nearly 40% of our expeditionary logistics. Correct. It would expose our newest slip space, technology. He leaned back. So why are we discussing this? The room became quiet. General Hale looked directly at him because someone asked. The debate lasted 6 hours. Some argued caution. Some demanded neutrality. Others questioned whether it might be an ambush. Admiral Sophia Chen listened patiently before standing. My grandfather spent his childhood trapped beneath earthquake rubble. The room looked toward her. He survived because strangers dug with bleeding hands for 48 hours. She paused. They never asked what country he came from. Silence answered her. They only knew another human being was still alive. She looked around the chamber. If we ignore this transmission, then all our speeches about civilization are decorations. No applause followed. There didn't need to be any. General Hale requested the floor one final time. He placed both hands on the conference table. We've spent generations preparing for war. His voice remained steady. We built carriers capable of crossing galaxies. No one interrupted. We trained soldiers to defend humanity from anything. Another pause. But today, he looked toward the frozen distress signal. Someone else needs defending. He straightened. If those people die because we were afraid to burn fuel, then every metal hanging in my office becomes worthless metal. The vote appeared across the chamber. Green, 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 one by one, until every nation agreed. Unanimous. Orders spread across Earth in less than 5 minutes. Shipyards awakened. Massive dry dock doors opened. Fusion reactors thundered alive. Heavy transport elevators carried armored rescue vehicles toward waiting carriers. The industrial districts of Luna erupted into controlled chaos. Thousands of mechanics climbed scaffolding surrounding kilometer-long starships. Sparks rained through cavernous assembly bays as welders reinforced rescue modules that had never before been used in combat. Cargo drones loaded medical supplies, atmospheric processors, water purification systems, and enough food to feed entire colonies. This was not a battle fleet preparing for conquest. It was a civilization preparing to refuse someone else's extinction. Commander Marcus Hale walked slowly through Hangar 7. Crew members saluted. He returned every salute with a nod. Young pilot Emma Brooks approached nervously. Sir, yes? Do you think they're still alive? He looked toward the enormous rescue carrier towering above them. I don't know, she swallowed. What if we're too late? Marcus answered quietly. Then we'll make certain nobody else is. She stood straighter. I understand, sir. Above Earth, 32 colossal ships assembled in orbit. Their hulls were scarred from decades of patrols. Their armor carried weld marks instead of polished paint. They looked less like elegant spacecraft and more like moving fortresses built by people who expected the universe to hit back. Rescue barges nestled between armored cruisers. Hospital ships activated white navigation lights. Escort destroyers rotated into protective formations. Every vessel shared one destination. No one aboard knew who they were going to save. None of them asked. Deep inside the command carrier Resolute, Marcus entered the bridge. Fleet status. All reactors online. Medical divisions loaded. Slip space calculations complete. Navigation synchronized. He inhaled slowly. The bridge became perfectly still. Every officer waited. Marcus pressed the fleet-wide transmitter. This is Commander Marcus Hale. Thousands listened. We have received a voice from the dark. No unnecessary speeches followed. Someone believed they were alone. His hand rested against the command rail. They were wrong. Outside the viewport, 32 human ships aligned into perfect formation. Blue energy rippled along their engines. Space itself began to bend. Marcus gave the final order. Open the corridor. Reality split apart. One by one, Earth's rescue fleet disappeared into the wound between stars, racing toward a dying ship that had already begun counting its final hours. Darkness had become a routine aboard the Valoran. The emergency batteries surrendered one section after another until entire corridors disappeared beneath absolute black. Crew members no longer wasted precious flashlight power unless someone collapsed or another life support valve froze shut. Every breath sounded louder than it should have inside a dying ship. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was the silence of people who had already begun saying goodbye in their own minds. Captain Kalen sat on the bridge with both hands resting on the cold command console. The countdown clock displayed only one number that mattered. 5 hours, 11 minutes of breathable atmosphere remaining. Nobody spoke. There was nothing left to report. Commander Varek finally broke the silence. "We've lost Deck 7. Kalen nodded weakly. "Seal it." There were volunteers repairing the scrubbers. "I know. They asked me not to lock them out." Kalen stared through the dark viewport. "If I reopen the bulkheads, the rest of the ship dies with them." Varek lowered his head. "I've already sealed them." Neither officer had the strength to mourn anymore. The medical bay had become unbearably crowded. Patients no longer occupied beds because there were not enough beds left. Families sat together against steel walls wrapped in emergency blankets, while oxygen masks were passed from one person to another every few minutes. Dr. Soraya had not slept for nearly 4 days. Her hands trembled while replacing empty medication injectors that contained nothing except hope. A young engineer approached carrying an elderly woman. "Doctor!" Soraya hurried over. The engineer's voice cracked. "She gave me her oxygen filter." The old woman smiled despite barely being conscious. "He builds engines." She struggled for another breath. "I've already lived." The engineer knelt beside her. "I won't take it." Tears rolled down his face. She reached up with shaking fingers and gently touched his cheek. "Go home for both of us." The room became painfully quiet. No machine could measure the weight of sacrifice. Hours later, another distress transmission drifted into the endless void. The message had become shorter. There wasn't enough power for long broadcasts anymore. "This is Captain Kalen. Crew alive, Anyun receiving. Please." The transmitter died before finishing. Kalen leaned back. "I think," he smiled sadly, "I think that's enough." Thousands of light years away, 32 human warships crossed slipspace in absolute formation. The phenomenon outside their armored hulls resembled an endless ocean of blue lightning folding around impossible geometry. Massive engines shook entire decks with controlled violence, while navigation computers continuously corrected microscopic errors that could scatter a fleet across different star systems. Inside the flagship Resolute, Commander Marcus Hale walked through the medical hangar. Hundreds of human doctors prepared surgical stations. Nurses secured trauma kits to magnetic racks. Cargo drones and unloaded portable oxygen generators larger than transport vehicles. No one spoke casually. Every face carried the same quiet determination. Dr. Elena Carter inspected another row of emergency stretchers. Marcus stopped beside her. "How many patients?" "As many as they send. If there are more," she continued, checking supplies. "We make room." He noticed the dark circles beneath her eyes. "You haven't rested. I will." "When? When nobody is dying." Marcus almost argued. Instead, he placed a hand on her shoulder. "You always were stubborn," she smiled faintly. "I learned from Marines." On the bridge, sensors suddenly erupted with activity. "Commander!" Marcus turned immediately. "Report." Navigator Brooks stared at her console. "We've located the distress beacon." "Condition?" A heavy silence filled the bridge. Finally, she answered. "The ship isn't moving." Marcus understood instantly. "They're drifting." "Yes, sir." Another officer looked up. "We're also detecting multiple wreck signatures." "Battle damage?" "It appears so." Marcus inhaled slowly. No wonder nobody came. He looked toward the tactical display. "Bring us in." Far ahead, the Valoran drifted alone beneath a pale blue star. Its once proud hull had become scarred beyond recognition. Entire sections had been torn away. Frozen atmosphere escaped through microscopic fractures like silver mist. Inside the bridge, oxygen warnings echoed every few minutes. Captain Kalen could barely remain awake. Lieutenant Eris suddenly frowned at his scanner. "I'm detecting something." Nobody reacted. Probably another malfunction, another ghost signal. Eris adjusted the sensors again. His heartbeat accelerated. "No," he whispered. "No, this can't be right." Commander Varek stepped beside him. "What is it?" "Slipspace rupture." Kalen slowly opened his eyes. "How many vessels?" Eris swallowed. His voice failed. "I can't count them." Space itself cracked open. Not exploded. Opened. Massive blue fractures spread across the darkness before 32 colossal silhouettes emerged together. One after another, then another, then another. The newcomers weren't elegant. Their hulls were thick, angular, covered in armor plates, exposed structural beams, external cargo cranes, and heavy weapon batteries, large enough to resemble skyscrapers attached to steel mountains. Running lights glowed white instead of military red. Medical insignia stretched across several kilometer-long vessels. Behind them came supply carriers, repair ships, hospital barges, fuel tenders. Every vessel immediately formed a defensive sphere around the dying alien cruiser. Captain Kalen stared without breathing. Commander Varek whispered only one sentence. "The Death Worlders." Every story he had ever heard returned at once. Humans. The species from the violent world where oceans drowned continents, predators hunted for sport, diseases evolved faster than medicine, Storms swallowed cities, and gravity crushed weaker life forms. Galactic folklore described humans as monsters who survived because nothing on Earth had ever shown mercy. Nobody had mentioned this. Nobody had mentioned rescue ships. The main communication console suddenly activated. An unfamiliar language filled the bridge. Moments later, the translator synchronized. A calm male voice emerged through static. "This is Human Rescue Fleet Command. Silence. We have received your distress call." Nobody aboard the Valoran moved. The voice continued. "You are no longer alone." Captain Kalen felt something break inside his chest. Not fear. Relief. Real relief, the kind that hurts. He tried to answer but couldn't speak. Instead, tears rolled silently across his face. Docking clamps locked against the shattered alien hull. Heavy magnetic seals engaged. Pressure equalization began. The inner airlock slowly opened. Every surviving crew member waited. Some expected armored soldiers. Others expected interrogators. The first person through the hatch carried neither rifle nor weapon. She carried 2 medical bags. Behind her walked 6 doctors, then engineers, then firefighters pushing oxygen generators. Dr. Elena Carter removed her helmet. She smiled gently. "My name is Elena." The translator converted every word. "We're here to help." No speeches, no demands, no conditions. Only those 4 words. An elderly alien collapsed to his knees crying. Human engineers spread through the dying ship with disciplined urgency. Heavy boots echoed through the corridors, while portable reactors were dragged across damaged decks. Welding torches filled dark passageways with showers of orange sparks. Atmosphere processors roared back to life, one compartment after another. Emergency floodlights illuminated rooms that had been abandoned to darkness for days. Chief Engineer Celis watched in disbelief. A broad-shouldered human mechanic forced open a twisted maintenance hatch, using nothing but an industrial hydraulic brace. She blinked. "That hatch weighs." Another human laughed while lifting it aside. "I've carried heavier." Within minutes, fresh air flowed through the compartment. Celis inhaled deeply. She had forgotten what clean oxygen felt like. The medical rescue became even more unbelievable. Human doctors worked without stopping. Doctor. Elena moved from patient to patient until sweat soaked through her uniform. She inserted IV lines, repaired fractures, treated radiation burns, and gently comforted terrified children who couldn't understand her language but somehow understood her smile. Human nurses refused meal breaks despite repeated orders. One exhausted medic finally leaned against a wall. Another handed him a bottle of water. 5 minutes. He shook his head. "There are still people waiting. You'll collapse. Then drag me to the next patient." Neither of them smiled. Neither considered stopping. Captain Kalen slowly walked through his own ship. Every corridor looked different. Portable lights illuminated ceilings. Cargo drones distributed food. Human Marines carried frightened children on their shoulders while engineers rebuilt environmental systems around them. Commander Varric stared quietly. "I don't understand." "What? They owe us nothing." Kalen looked toward a human technician kneeling beside an elderly alien, carefully repairing her breathing mask with patient hands. "No," he answered softly. "They simply decided that wasn't important." Hours passed. Life returned. For the first time in weeks, laughter echoed somewhere aboard the Valoran, weak, tired, but unmistakably alive. Captain Kalen finally entered the human flagship, resolute to personally thank Commander Marcus Hale. The bridge fell silent as the alien captain approached. Marcus stepped forward. "You made it." Kalen struggled to find words. "My people, they'll survive. You crossed half the galaxy." Marcus nodded. "You asked." Kalen lowered his head. "I don't know how to repay Earth." Marcus answered almost immediately. "You don't." The alien looked up. "When someone's drowning," Marcus said quietly, "you don't send them an invoice." The peaceful moment lasted less than 2 minutes. A piercing alarm exploded across every human vessel. Red warning lights flooded the bridge. Tactical Officer Brooks looked up sharply. "Commander!" Marcus turned instantly. "Contact. Multiple hyperspace ruptures. How many?" Her face turned pale. "Over 100. The main display filled with crimson icons. Massive enemy dreadnoughts emerged from slipspace, one after another, their weapons already charging. Captain Kalen felt all hope disappear. "They found us." Marcus remained perfectly calm. He looked once toward the damaged Valoran, then toward the approaching Armada. His voice never rose. "Signal every ship." The fleet acknowledged. 32 human warships moved together with mechanical precision. Not backward, forward. Massive armored hulls positioned themselves between the alien cruiser and the advancing enemy. Hospital ships withdrew behind the wall. Rescue vessels disappeared into the protective formation. Every battleship locked shields. Every cannon rotated toward the darkness. Commander Marcus Hale folded his hands behind his back as the first enemy targeting beams illuminated the human fleet. His final order echoed across every deck. "Nobody touches that ship." Then the void fell silent, waiting to see which civilization would blink first. The enemy armada arrived without ceremony. More than 100 warships emerged from slipspace in disciplined formation, their black hulls swallowing the light of nearby stars. Long-range targeting lasers swept across the human fleet while weapon capacitors glowed beneath armored plating. The display aboard the Resolute filled with crimson warning symbols until there was barely any empty space left on the tactical map. No one aboard the human flagship panicked. Bridge officers continued their work with practiced precision. Navigation teams quietly adjusted formation spacing, while engineering crews reinforced shield generators beyond their normal operating limits. Marines secured evacuation routes even though no evacuation had been ordered. Every person understood exactly what was happening. They had become a wall, and walls were expected to stand. Commander Marcus Hale remained motionless at the center of the bridge. "Open a channel." The communications officer nodded. "They're transmitting first." A cold voice echoed throughout every human and alien vessel. "This is Grand Admiral Zareth of the Dominion Fleet." The translation carried no emotion. "You are interfering with a lawful military operation." Marcus folded his hands behind his back. "Continue. The damaged vessel under your protection belongs to our enemy. Withdraw immediately, and your fleet will be allowed safe passage." Silence followed. The officers aboard the Valoran stared toward the human flagship. Captain Kalen whispered quietly, "They'll leave." Commander Varric lowered his head. "No one starts a war over strangers." Kalen wanted to believe him, but something deep inside refused. Marcus finally stepped toward the transmitter. His voice remained calm. "The ship behind us requested humanitarian assistance." He paused. "We answered." Grand Admiral Zareth responded immediately. "They are not your concern." Marcus looked through the bridge viewport toward the battered Valoran. "They became our concern the moment they asked for help." "You are risking your civilization," Marcus answered without raising his voice. "If protecting civilians is a risk, it's one humanity accepted long before reaching the stars." The enemy transmission ended. Across the human fleet, combat stations activated. Heavy magnetic cannons rotated toward the approaching Armada. Missile silos opened in synchronized motion, while shield generators expanded into overlapping defensive layers. Carrier groups repositioned hospital ships behind battleships, creating multiple rings of protection around the Valoran. No captain questioned the orders. No crew member requested permission to retreat. On the hospital ship Mercy, Dr. Elena Carter continued treating patients as though nothing outside had changed. A young nurse rushed toward her. "Doctor, we're entering a combat zone." "I know. Shouldn't we prepare evacuation procedures?" Elena gently secured another oxygen mask onto an exhausted alien child. "We are preparing." The nurse looked confused. Elena smiled faintly. "By making sure they're alive when this ends." Captain Kalen walked through the human medical deck. Alien civilians rested beside human Marines who quietly shared water, blankets, and emergency rations. One little alien girl carefully examined the enormous armored glove of a human engineer before placing her tiny hand inside it. The engineer laughed softly and pretended she possessed greater strength, allowing her to push him backward several exaggerated steps. For the first time in weeks, the child laughed. Kalen stopped walking, his eyes filled with tears. Commander Varric stood beside him. "They're smiling." Kalen nodded. "They forgot they were dying." The tactical countdown reached 0. Every officer aboard the Resolute waited for the first shot. It never came. Instead, one Dominion cruiser slowly advanced beyond the enemy formation, weapons fully charged. Marcus watched carefully. Tactical. No firing solution authorized. Maintain discipline. The cruiser continued forward until it entered human weapons range. Still, no one fired. On the Dominion flagship, Admiral Zareth studied the human formation with growing disbelief. His intelligence reports described Deathworlders as violent creatures whose worlds had forged ruthless warriors. Instead, he found restraint. Every human weapon remained locked. Every defensive shield remained active. Not one vessel broke formation. Not one captain attempted intimidation. They simply stood between danger and complete strangers. Zareth turned toward his intelligence minister. "They know they are outnumbered. 3-1, Admiral. They understand they could be destroyed? Yes." He looked once more at the silent human fleet. "Then why don't they move?" No one aboard his bridge had an answer. Marcus requested one final transmission. "This message is for every commander listening." The communication spread across both fleets. "You believe strength is measured by the enemies you destroy." He paused. "Humanity measures strength differently." Bridge crews across dozens of ships listened in complete silence. "The strongest person is the one who stands between innocent people and those who would harm them." Marcus's voice never changed. "You may destroy us." Another pause. "You will not reach them." The transmission ended. Nothing followed. Not threats, not speeches, only silence. Minutes passed. The Dominion fleet remained perfectly still. Inside the flagship, Admiral Zareth replayed Marcus's final sentence several times. He remembered every civilization he had conquered, every government had bargained, every admiral had demanded better terms, every leader had eventually sacrificed civilians to preserve military assets. Humans had done the opposite. They had risked everything. For people they had never met. Zareth slowly lowered his head. "Stand down." His bridge officers froze. "Admiral, you heard me, but victory is certain." He looked toward the human wall. "No." His voice carried unexpected respect. "It isn't." The officer frowned. "They cannot defeat us. They already have, one by one." Dominion weapon systems powered down. Targeting beams disappeared. Missile ports closed. Massive warships rotated away from the human fleet before entering slip space exactly as they had arrived. Within minutes, they were gone. No battle, no explosions, no victory parade, only quiet disbelief. Across the Valoran, exhausted crew members collapsed into tears. Some embraced. Others simply sat against cold steel walls, unable to process that they were still alive. Captain Kalen looked toward Marcus. "You never fired." Marcus nodded. "We came to save lives. You could have died." Marcus smiled. "We were prepared to." The journey to the Kellar Union homeworld lasted 12 days. Human engineers repaired the Valoran throughout the voyage. Entire reactor assemblies were replaced, damaged hull sections reinforced, and environmental systems rebuilt from scratch. Human mechanics worked beside alien engineers without translators, communicating through sketches, hand signals, and shared determination. Meals became communal. Stories crossed languages. Children from both species played together inside cargo bays that had been transformed into temporary recreation centers. Fear slowly disappeared. Trust replaced it. When the rescue convoy entered the Kellar system, every available civilian vessel filled the surrounding space. Millions had believed the Valoran lost forever. Orbital stations broadcast continuous emergency alerts. Families waited in silence. Then the first images appeared. The damaged cruiser, alive, escorted by enormous human ships. No one spoke. Across cities, factories, schools, and orbital habitats, people simply watched. The Valoran crossed into planetary orbit, docking clamps engaged. The first airlock opened. Captain Kalen stepped onto home soil. His wife ran toward him. Neither of them spoke. They embraced with the desperate strength of people who had already mourned each other. Nearby, parents found children, brothers found sisters. Friends who had prepared funerals instead found living faces. The reunion spread across every docking platform. Even the human Marines quietly turned away to give grieving families their privacy. Dr. Elena wiped tears from her own eyes. One of her nurses whispered, "We did it." Elena smiled. "No." She looked toward the reunited families. They did. Several weeks later, the Galactic Assembly convened an emergency session. Representatives from thousands of civilizations watched a recording recovered from every fleet involved. They saw the starving Valoran. They saw humanity's rescue mission. They saw doctors carrying strangers through smoke-filled corridors. They saw engineers rebuilding life support before repairing weapons. Finally, they watched 32 human warships form an unbreakable shield around a dying civilian vessel. The chamber remained silent long after the recording ended. No applause followed. Many delegates simply lowered their heads. The oldest ambassador present finally stood. "For centuries," his voice trembled, "we feared Earth because it survived the harshest world known to intelligent life." He looked around the enormous chamber. "We were wrong." Another long silence settled over the assembly. We should have feared becoming the kind of civilization that ignored a cry for help. Months later, rescue frequencies across explored space received a new automatic response whenever any distress beacon was detected. The message originated from Earth. It required no political approval, no negotiations, no debate. Every transmission began with the same calm voice. "Distress signal confirmed." A brief pause followed. Then the sentence spread across the stars, carrying with it a promise stronger than any fleet ever built. "Hold on. We are coming." And from that day forward, every civilization understood why alien armadas that crossed Earth's borders sometimes never returned. It wasn't because humanity hunted them. It was because once the Deathworlders chose to stand between the innocent and danger, nothing in the galaxy could make them step aside.